You can now hear Movie Heaven, Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers that enjoy talking about other directors' work. And we're currently on our second pass of the alphabet, looking at directors out there. So we are on letter B currently, which obviously, as with many of these letters, there's a lot of options. We've got everything from Bergman to Bay. I know we talked about at one point John Boorman, as we'd mentioned him on a few podcasts, and I know personally I've always kind of also been interested in like Kenneth Branagh from a sort of director stroke actor point of view. But what we also realized is we want to be as diverse as possible on this, and one of the things that we hadn't covered in any of the first pass was any women filmmakers. We looked at those, and there was obviously one in there that was, of course, very influential for us as well, and that was Kathryn Bigelow. So today we're going to look at the work of Kathryn Bigelow.
We are indeed. She's well known for doing action films. As some people put it, a woman in a man's world.
Hey, there you go. Well, I must admit, looking back over a sort of body of work for this, it did bring up a lot of memories and a lot of stories, as these things always do. But certainly out of the women filmmakers out there, she's always been big on the radar. Of course, she has also sort of set some records in the fact that she was the first woman to win an Oscar and win a BAFTA in 2010 for the Hurt Locker. Deservedly so, I would say. And but yeah, she's got quite a varied body of work out there, and has obviously been involved. She gets involved at quite a technical level as well with her filmmaking, which I'm sure we'll cover as we go through this.
It sounds wrong, doesn't it, when you just say she was the first woman to win an Oscar and a BAFTA for Best Director? I mean, it's just...
Oh, it's terrible, isn't it?
It's very terrible.
Yeah, I mean, we're not condoning that. We're actually saying we support it, and we're glad that she did. But yes, you are absolutely right when you think of the history of film. There are still, even to this day, not enough female voices out there, not enough female directors, and there are some very good ones. Kathryn Bigelow is in a handful of I guess well-known female directors out there. Again, not very many. We got through an entire alphabet without even mentioning one.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when we were looking for the second series, we said, well, we want to include more women directors, and there wasn't many on the say the list of famous directors or directors you may have heard of, because I'm sure there's more women directors out there than that list was giving up.
Oh, undoubtedly. And also, it is fair to say, and I've said this before, this podcast, it is very personal to the sort of films that we had exposure to growing up, and have been sort of present in our lifetime. And to be fair, Kathryn Bigelow is probably, out of all of the female directors, she is probably the one that I personally am most familiar with the work of, simply because she has dealt with a lot of topics that when I was younger were of interest to me. Quite frankly, those types of films, and it's interesting to see her. She's got sort of more notable acclaim later in her career, when she started dealing with, I guess, um, more sort of grown up and important subject matters. Things like, obviously the Hurt Locker dealt with the Middle East, as did Zero Dark 30, both of which were collaborations with writer Mark Bowl. So
that's kind of interesting that you put that sort of differentiation, deliberation between her work, because she's more known for the work she did in the 80s and 90s, which include work like Near Dark, Blue Steel, Point Break, Strange Days. And it's funny how it's kind of like, from what you were saying there, and it's true, because I was looking at her body of work, that her earlier work seemed to be of a more of a popcorn nature. I mean, dealing with genres like horror and action, where in her later career now that it's been a lot more serious, a lot more concurrent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting, because that seems to be the case with quite a lot of directors we sort of grew up with, and we've talked about on this podcast. In quite a lot of cases, they sort of the obvious one that springs to mind is like Clint Eastwood, for example. He was always very well known for his sort of action movies and more sort of popcorny type stuff. But obviously, in later years, he's as he's got older, he's developed into dealing with more serious and diverse subjects. But yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting.
Well, before we move on, I just want to ask: do you think it's a case that it was what they had access to, or what interested them?
That's a really good question. I think possibly, as the more you do, and the more you get taken seriously, and the more, if you like, you become successful, I guess that does in turn perhaps open up a wider palette for you to explore more sort of diverse possibilities, because because you've got that sort of track record, as it were, and maybe things that are more personal to an individual, they can start to bring in. But it might also be, in fact, it's probably a little bit of the both, actually. It's probably more as you get older, and as you grow up, and as you reflect on life more, maybe you do get a bit more serious, or your views change slightly. I don't know. It is a very, very interesting phenomenon. I don't really know what the answer to it is, to be honest with you. What do you think?
Well, I kind of agree with it's a bit of both, because at the end of the day, unless you're the originator of the story, if you're the one who finds the story and wants to make it, it's a lot of the time your approach to make it via the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I'm not quite sure if Kathryn Bigelow, went out and found the Hurt Locker, or she was offered it. So it seems it can be a case that the longer you're around, the more serious projects are offered to you. I mean, it's really weird. I mean, there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to Hollywood.
No.
There could be a director who literally makes one short film, and then the next film he's handed is like a $100 million film, and you're like,
Yeah.
And then there's others who have worked their whole life making low budget films, and then suddenly there's this point where suddenly the gates open for them, and they're allowed to to work, to direct these big budgeted films.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly in Kathryn Bigelow's case, which we will come to as we go through this, I know there was a passion project in there that that she very much wanted to do that wasn't so successful. So
I wonder which one that was.
But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, what I often enjoy about all of this is I talk very fondly about the good old days back in film school in the mid to late 90s. And I remember we had a class which was in our first year, which was called Intro to Film, and it was much more of it just dealt with cinema and the history of cinema and the history of filmmaking, and it was more of a sort of theoretical class before we started getting into the practical stuff and actually making films, which was more in the second year. And I remember I had a really interesting teacher. He was fantastic, a guy called Dr. Farr. And he was a really interesting character, massively passionate about movies, and introduced me to through the class to a lot of things. I mean, we watched everything from sort of James Wells' Frankenstein, Double Indemnity, Chinatown, right up to it's the first time I ever saw the Coen brothers' Fargo was in his class. And the reason I bring this up in relation to Kathryn Bigelow was there was one class exercise that we had where he had a list of films, and you have to forgive me, I don't remember exactly what was on this list of films, but he wanted us to each pick a film and basically do a presentation on the film, and in that presentation try and see why he'd picked this for the list.
Okay.
And on that list was actually Near Dark by
right.
Kathryn Bigelow, which I picked. In fact, I think I was actually the only person in the class that picked that one, because there were, again, I don't remember the exact list, but there were some more sort of usual expected suspects on there, if you like, on that list of films. And I watched it and enjoyed it thoroughly, and did a presentation on it, which he obviously thought was quite good, because I remember I got an A for that. But it was more, the reason he had picked it is because it had kind of subverted the vampire genre slightly from what audiences necessarily expected at that time, in 1987. From a vampire film, and it is. I mean, it's not one of the picks today, but it is a really, really good film. I know we've kind of mentioned it before on this podcast, haven't we, for various reasons?
Yes. Yeah.
I think about having the cast of Aliens in it, perhaps.
I also have the cast of Aliens walking past a billboard that says Aliens on it.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I know we mentioned it for some particular point, but yeah. So so Kathryn Bigelow for me has kind of been there all the way, sort of through the journey, really, of wanting to become or becoming a filmmaker and studying film. So when we were looking at the strong female directors out there, she was certainly an easy choice.
Yeah, I mean, big influence on me, especially with Near Dark. Just because Near Dark was one of the influences on Blood and Roses.
Oh, of course. Yes, absolutely.
And I actually recorded a podcast for Filmwork talking about Near Dark in quite length. So if you want to listen to that episode, I actually have it on the independentrunnings.com website.
Oh,
if you just look at podcasts and scroll to the bottom, you'll find it there. You'll find the film work entries.
All right. Well, I for one will be listening, because I would very much like to hear about that. Certainly. Yeah.
Well, obviously I'm a fan. I'm a fan, and it was so funny because the first trailer I shot I cut for Blood and Roses. The music I used was a track from Near Dark, and it fit perfectly,
right.
Absolutely perfectly, the timing and everything. And I didn't cut to it, I just placed it onto the trailer, and it worked so effortlessly. But I mean, I'm also a big fan of Tangerine Dream.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So for a long time I had a track from Risky Business for my showreel, which was from Tangerine Dream.
Yeah. I know that was very much their time, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, I didn't realize how late in the game Miracle Mile was, because I went back and watched that recently, and Miracle Mile came out at the end of the 80s.
Right.
When it's a film that, when you watch it, looks very much from the mid 80s.
Yes.
So I was quite surprised by that. Quite surprised, because it came out at Sundance the same year that Sex, Lies and Videotape came out.
Right. Yes.
So
yeah. Well, I mean, on one of these podcast extras at some point, we'll have to talk a bit more about Blood and Roses, because you know, I'm sure I've got some questions for you on that one, and you know, we should look at it at some point, I think.
Yeah, it's overdue, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's overdue now.
Like it is.
Especially now it's out on release on Amazon Prime. So
yay, good plug.
Well, because it was only available in the States for a long time, and now it's available in the UK, it's available in Japan, and it's available in Germany and still the US through Amazon Prime. So, you know, there's no excuses now. If you've got an Amazon Prime account, you can watch it. Just if you search for Blood and Roses or Blood plus Roses, you will find it on there, and a lot of people have so far. So you know.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to know there's life still in it. That's.
I know it's really weird, because we're coming up to like 10 years since I've shot it.
Wow. Don't they go by quick? Yes.
They do indeed. They do indeed. And of course, one day soon I might finish Modern Love as well. So,
well, yes. Let's hope so. I know we're all we'll go to Fright Fest, and then we'll say, oh, next year we got to have a movie in there, like we said in that podcast. So yeah. Anyway, yes. Someone who doesn't need to enter a movie in there is Kathryn Bigelow.
There we go.
So, and then of course she did. Oliver Stone produced Blue Steel for her, didn't he, back in '89?
That's right. Yeah.
Which you know, I think I've not seen that in years, but I think I quite enjoyed it at the time, if memory serves.
Yeah, it continued the collaboration between her and Eric Red, who wrote Near Dark. So
that's right.
And I certainly remember the advertising for it. I mean, it's very much. There's a Akira Kurosawa film called Stray Dog, which covers the same idea of a cop who loses their gun.
Oh, right.
And then has to try and find it. But in that film, it's more about his search to find the gun, less so about the person who's using it.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Or Hollywood cinema somehow links back to Kurosawa.
yeah, in some sense. I think cinema does eat itself. It does eat its own tail, because it's constantly going through ideas and, you know, churning them out as something different or the same, or so. Yeah, I mean, but then Akira Kurosawa, he was influenced by westerns, you know. So
yes, yeah. So it's all circular.
It's all circular.
Yes. And talking about things, you know, being influenced and made into something else. That's quite a good segue.
Okay, so we're going to get into our picks for Movie Heavens. So, as Keith so, you know, skillfully...
Wow, more luck than judgment, I think.
He steered the conversation this way. Keith, what is your pick for Movie Heaven?
Okay, well, you know, it was tricky, because overall I don't really think Kathryn Bigelow as such has done a bad film. There are some that are not so good, but I think she's an incredibly competent filmmaker, and I like a lot of her movies. But I just thought for this one, I'm going to go for something fun. And so I've picked 1991 Point Break, starring, you know, an action crime thriller starring Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves. Yes. You know, this one was a lot of fun. I remember, first going to see it. It was just one of those films that left me with a big smile on my face. It's funny actually, because we're saying about paving way for other things, and I mean, I kind of, Point Break's got your sort of criminal surfers, if you like, but I often think it was massively influential for another guilty pleasure of mine, Fast and Furious, the original, with the now late Paul Walker and Vin Diesel, where it kind of took the same idea as Point Break but made it about street racing. And
yeah, I have to say, I mean, it's fun, that you're saying that it's a lot of fun, but I was going back and watching it again recently. You just realize what great craftsmanship's going on.
Yes,
because it all builds on it, and it also takes its time. I've not seen the remake, but one of the things I've heard is that they just concentrate a lot more on the extreme sport angle of it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the remake, and I mean, obviously remakes and reimaginings and those sort of films, they often get ragged on a lot. And sometimes I think, particularly if there's a big enough gap, I do actually feel there's nothing wrong with, reimagining films if you bring something different to it and if you do a different twist on it or whatever. I mean, we've talked about this, I know, in some length on other podcasts, but I have to say, I mean, I know it was 25 years later that this remake came out, but oh my God, it is a poor remake. I went to see it, and it just lacked all the charisma and style of Kathryn Bigelow's film very much. You're absolutely right. It does focus more, it's not just about surfers. It's more about extreme sports in general. And I know, of course, in the original Point Break, they dealt with the skydiving stuff as well. And this, in terms of photography and everything, it films all these extreme sports really well. But in terms of holding that together with the story and in interesting reimaginings of these characters, it really doesn't do. And it does. It takes the same plot and the same characters and just sort of brings it up to date. Lots more tattoos. But no, it really was a poor comparison. And of course, you've got in the Gary Busey role, you've got Ray Winstone, and I have to say, he kind of phoned that in somewhat.
Yeah, Ray seems to do a lot of stuff for the money these days.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's done some wonderful stuff. Don't get me wrong, but in this,
well, I mean, but get back to my point. I mean, the thing I love about this original is that it is sort of, it's very organic. So, so you get these two cops put together, one older, one's younger, and the older one has a theory about who these, bank robbers are. And so they follow that, and then you sort of see him learn to surf. And then as he starts to learn to surf, he meets other surfers and then gets accepted into like a clan who, and then you see that friendship grow. And then when spoiler, and there's going to be plenty of spoilers in this one.
Oh yeah. Well, these are oldish films, to be fair.
Yeah, but so, I mean, the thing is, though, when you're watching it, you don't think for a second that these guys, are the actual ex-presidents, this gang of bank robbers who are very successful at robbing banks. So, and then once you sort of, they realise who each other are, then and then it carries on, and you just see them. You see this sort of tight knit group fall apart, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing: the characterization and the relationship between these characters does work extremely well. I mean, up until this point, I guess Keanu Reeves was kind of best known as being, Bill and Ted. He's Ted, isn't he? And Bill and Ted. Yeah.
Whoa.
And playing, whoa, excellent, and all this. But he'd been kind of known for that, and this was obviously. I mean, he'd go on to, with Speed that we've also talked about, to become this action hero kind of guy. But his relationship with Patrick Swayze and Gary Busey in this film, it really works, and you do care about these characters. And obviously we've got Laurie Petty playing the love interest in this film with him, and it does. The story works. It's nicely played. The acting is of a okay. I know people laugh at Keanu Reeves, but I mean, he for this role, he's fine. He's great. He's in good shape. He learned to do a lot of the surfing himself, and actually apparently still surfs to this day off the back of this film, if you believe what you read online. But yeah, I mean, the other thing that I'll be honest, kind of attracted me to the film, back in the day when I first saw the poster for this, was the fact that it had James Cameron down as the executive producer on it, and of course, apparently he did quite a bit more than that. He was actually involved in the script, but couldn't get a credit for it because of some WGA law or argument with them or something. And
it would be a WGA ruling.
And he was also, I believe, involved somewhat in the edit as well, although he's not actually credited for that. But at the time it was kind of, I was, as I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, a massive James Cameron fan, and the fact that his name was attached to this when I saw the poster was like, oh, I need to see that looks awesome, so, and it was.
Well, I saw this film off the back of the trailer, seeing it at the beginning of another video rental, and I just the trailer was really good, and you just went, oh, I really want to see this looks fun. And it was great fun. I mean, it's one of these things where the casting just really works in this film, because everybody has great chemistry with everybody else. So you got the relationship between Johnny Utah and Pappas, which are the two cops, the partners, and that works really well. And then you've got the relationship between Johnny Utah and Bodhi, which is the Patrick Swayze character. And then you have the relationship as well between Johnny Utah and Tyler, which is played by Laurie Petty. And they just work and feed off each other really well.
Yeah.
And everybody has that moment to shine.
Yes.
And of course, there's another actor in it who, I think is really good, who plays part of the gang, is James LaGrosse.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yes.
And of course, he's a... Kathryn Bigelow brought him on because he had like a bit part in Near Dark.
That's right.
He played the young lad in the bar, the one who runs away.
Yeah. Oh no, James LaGrosse is a great actor anyway, and this does, I think, in terms of an action film, this kind of delivers and works on all those levels. It also, of course, as many things do with me, it does bring up a little story as well. When I was living in Florida, going to film school, we worked on a feature called The 1st of May. I think I've mentioned it before. It starred Julie Harris, and the stunt coordinator on this was a guy called Glenn Wilder, who he was living in Florida at that point, because I think he was working on the TV show Sequest DSV, which had moved to Florida at that point.
Oh, okay. And, yes, I remember Sequest.
Yeah, and he's done stunts on loads of films, loads of big films. You only need to IMDb him. But he was the stunt coordinator on the 1st of May, and I had to go over to his rather nice home to pick up some film stock or something. I can't remember why it was now. I know I was an assistant director on it, and I was sent to do some errand just prior to a shooting, and I went over there, and of course, he knew pretty early on that I was a fan of some of his work, or certainly some of the films that he had worked on, and he was indeed the stunt coordinator on Point Break. And I remember he was obviously somewhat flattered or whatever, but got a bit carried away, so he waxed Point Break on. And it's the chase scene where Johnny Utah is chasing one of the ex-presidents, in inverted commas.
It's Patrick Swayze's character.
Although it actually wasn't, because he was there promoting Ghost at the time, so it was a stuntman with with that mask on. But yes, it's supposed to be chasing Bodhi. And Glenn Wilder did the what was a pogo cam rather than a steady cam, but the actual chase for it. And I remember he put it on and he actually talked me through. It was like commentary, but he was stood right there. He talked me through every single shot, from the dog being thrown at him, to the going over the fence and the whole thing. But yeah, that was pretty cool to get a sort of personal audio commentary for that particular section of the film. But again, it was great stunt work. I mean, that was what I know. Obviously, Patrick Swayze did a lot of his the skydiving himself, because it was one of his hobbies. And obviously the surfing is fantastic in that film, and all of the chasing and the gunfights and everything. It really does work. And I have to say, unfortunately, the remake, if you haven't already seen it, then I would say don't bother, because it is a sad disappointment after this great film.
Well, that chase scene's the same chase scene they use in oh fucking hell! I had it on the tip of my tongue. What's the Simon Pegg film?
Oh, Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So it's the chase scene they're watching in Hot Fuzz, the one they actually copy.
That's right, yes.
But what I also like as well is that Patrick Swayze's character Bodhi recognises Johnny Utah as being a football player, American football. And he asks him why, he didn't go pro, and he said he busted his knee.
Yes.
And in that chase scene, you actually see him bust his knee. He sort of, hurts himself, and just brings back that old injury. And then for the rest of the film, he's still got that injury, which is a lovely touch, because usually in a film, that is the excuse, I hurt my back, I busted my knee, and then it never affects them in the rest of the film. They can run around, jump over things, and there's no effect. But yet, in this film, you see him actually injure himself again.
Yeah.
The old injury comes back, and it's a marvellous little touch.
It is, and it's one of the things. Slight spoiler, but it is one of the things that they do change in the remake. Is his backstory and his ghost is slightly different. So he's not a football player that has an injury. He is, in fact, always an extreme sports guy that loses his best friend during a stunt.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, and again, not as effective, because you don't really have that sort of payoff later in the film like you do in this version.
And also the fact is that he is just doing his job. He's an FBI agent. He's not doing it for any other reasons, but apart from trying to nail the ex-presidents.
Yes.
So it comes from that point of view. It's nothing to do with some sort of personal tragedy, or it's just a guy who's just what's the sergeant say?
We got young, dumb, and full of cum.
That's it.
Yes, yeah. In fact, he's great as well. That's
John C. McGinley.
Yeah. Who plays? He plays that off to a T, doesn't he? In fact, that's a great shot, because that's all done in a oneer, isn't it? That bit when they're first walking through the the FBI building, and he's talking to Keanu, and he's saying about he takes the skin off chicken and all that stuff, and that's all rather nicely done.
Well, he is the new face of the FBI.
Yeah, but no, it's a great film. I mean, I know lots of people know it, and of course, hopefully, I'm hoping it'll gain more of an audience, because I'm hoping people will, if they've seen the not very good remake, I have to say, that might want to go back and revisit the original, because this really is a decent action crime thriller, and really works. So I thought, yes, let's go with one. Let's go with one that's a bit of fun. So there you have it.
So yeah, it's well worth checking out, and as I say, a bigger influence on Hot Fuzz, to the point where they parody some of it.
Yeah, as I said, and it's been an influence on other things, because I really do feel that Fast and Furious, which is quite an amazing franchise now, but the sort of roots of it starts with a very similar basic premise, basic setup, and for what it's worth, I think they're quite fun movies as well. Such a shame about Paul Walker, but
Yeah.
that's happening way too much these days. But
Yeah. Roll on 2017, I say.
Yes.
This year's just been a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
talking of years,
yes. You can probably guess what my pick is, can't you? So yes, my pick for movie heaven is the 1995 Strange Days.
Amazing. Yeah.
Which it's such a great film, and I think a lot of people are sort of starting to realize how good it is.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this was one I watched on video. I missed it at the cinema, and the thing one of the things I love about it is the fact that you have these kind of POV shots, and this is to do with the experience people have using these squibs or squids. Is it squibs or squids?
It's squid. Yeah, it's squid.
It's squid.
Yeah.
The main character of Lenny Nero explains what the letters stand for. But it's this tool that was designed for the police so that they could gather evidence, and got onto the black market, and there was many other applications you could use. And the idea is that when you put one of these things on, you step into the shoes of another person. So to kick things off, we get to see a bank robbery, and you experience it beat by beat, and it's as amazing. I know it's several shots cut into one, but it plays as one shot.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. So it starts in a car, and then they go in, they rob a restaurant, and the police turn up and they try and make a getaway, and the guy takes a fall off the roof, and you actually see like the sort of the cut off point. You see his point of view of hitting the ground. And then we are introduced to our main character, Lenny, tearing this thing off, and in shock that his friend's trying to give him a death tape. I think he calls it something else, isn't it? Like blackjack or something like that.
Well, yeah. He says, for God's sake, I don't deal in snuff.
Yeah.
I have to say, an excellent performance as well by Ray Fiennes in this film. I mean, it's very different to anything else he's really done, certainly before or since. And
well, yeah, because to think he came off the back of Schindler's List to come and do this.
Yes.
So you had him as like this really horrible Nazi. I mean, Nazis are bad to start off with, but he was just like a level above.
Yes.
And to sort of play this character where, he's bumbling, he's romantic, he's a bit of a sleaze. I mean, he's peddling what's more or less like a drug.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also the fact he can't get over a previous relationship.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing about this film, is it's to do with memory. And with the squid, you can relive memories, which he does, because he was in a relationship with Juliette Lewis's character Faith, and for whatever reason, it ended. But Lenny just couldn't get over it, and of course, this makes him blind to any potential other relationships, friends, people in front of him, because he's stuck with these memories. And so the counterpoint to this is Angela Bassett's character called Mace, and she's she lives in the real world. She's a bodyguard driver, gun for hire, and she very much lives in the real world and doesn't appreciate what Lenny is doing, but also because he's a friend, she looks out for him, even though she doesn't approve. And so what you have is several stories interweaving with each other. The main story is about the killing of Jericho 2K, who's this black rapper who also does a lot of good for the community. And it's kind of weird looking at the news lately with what's been going on in the States with the amount of cops shooting black people and the outrage that's happening, that this film is kind of timely in that sense. It is that really well. I mean, when this film came out, it was more to do with Rodney King.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. Yeah.
And the LA riots and what effect that had on the populace. And it's kind of weird that, over 20 years later, and we're still dealing with the same problems.
Yeah.
It just seems to be on a grander scale now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. There was the LA riots, but you didn't actually have people taking out cops that you do in the current situation.
Yeah. No, it is bizarre that we've not moved on in any way, have we? It's if anything, we've gone backwards. But this film, unfortunately, this film was a bit of a commercial flop, which is so, certainly watching it now, it's so unjust, because it really is a wonderful bit of filmmaking. It's very interesting. It deals with all sorts of themes. You've got racism, abuse of power, rape, voyeurism, all of those things packaged up in this, and it's all done very tightly. I mean, it is fair to say, sort of, just because of when it was set. I mean, it was made in 95, but it was supposed to be set on New Year's Eve 1999 to 2000. Yeah. So of course it's dated. The other thing is, that on the squid technology, it's essentially recorded onto what is mini disc, isn't it? Which again kind of dates it slightly.
Well, back then mini disc was the future.
It was, yes, but I think the design of the film, like the wardrobe and the look of the film, is very well done, very distinctive. The performances, like we've already said, we had Rafe off the back of Schindler's List, we had Angela Bassett off the back of What's Love Got to Do with It, the Tina Turner story thing. Juliette Lewis is in there. We've also got Tom Sizemore,
who we saw in a small part in Point Break.
There you go. Yes, absolutely. Yes, there you go. But and the other thing that I know people now would really take for granted, and you've already mentioned the wonderful opening POV shots, which essentially was 4 shots over a 4-minute opening. But the thing now is we take that for granted because we've got things like GoPros and all of this technology. But there is actually a very interesting hour-long lecture that Kathryn Bigelow does. I think it was possibly to the London at the London Film Festival, but it's done as a commentary track on some of the Blu-ray and DVD releases, where she spends an hour basically going over that opening 4 minutes. And it really is quite remarkable because obviously this was shot on 35mm film, and they had to spend, I think they spent 3 years developing that opening sequence, because it involved not only a camera operator and a focus puller, but it also involved a stunt person who was essentially being, whenever you see the right arm, that's a stunt man. When you see the left arm, it's the camera operator. But they also had to develop the pogo cam to have a head mounted rig which would have a video tap on it, which would allow the cameraman to see what the camera was recording. Because again, a lot of people nowadays take for granted, but when you were cranking film and running film cameras, you would have to have your eyepiece up to, or your eye up to the eyepiece to see what you were shooting. And it does seem so laughable now, but at the time in the mid-90s, that technology just wasn't available. And when you look at the painstaking choreography and the way that shot, that opening 4 minutes was planned, I mean, that really is a piece of remarkable filmmaking. Aside from the fact that this is a great story and with good acting and a great film all round, I mean, it really did sort of push the envelope at the time.
I mean, and the next one pushed it even more because they were on roller skates. When you see Lenny play back one of his memories with Faith, and they're on roller skates, and so obviously, and you see the cameraman or the stunt man or whoever's working with this, that they fall down, you see their legs go up and everything, so
yeah,
you had all that. I think I want to sort of go back to kind of, because I didn't go into what the second storyline was, because I only just mentioned the killing of not Jericho 2K but Jericho 1, sorry.
Yes.
And the other storyline you have is that somebody is sort of following Lenny and leaving him recordings that they've done, and the first one he gets is off the killing of this prostitute called Iris.
Mm-hmm.
And then it leads into that the fact that he's been to his home and all this kind of stuff. This guy is is real bad news, and how they sort of weave the two storylines together is that the Tom Sizemore character Max tells them gives them this idea that it's actually the police who are doing this. So the idea is that the Jericho 1 killing and this sort of psycho is like it's working, it's the same people. And of course it doesn't turn out to be that case. It actually turns out to be dun 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 Max himself who's doing it. So, but I mean, it's again, it's really well done because how they do it is because Lenny's is very protective of Faith, and he believes that Faith could be next. At the end, when he turns up at that hotel room and he sees a body and there's another envelope with his name on it, and he watches it, you think, oh my God, Faith has been killed.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out not to be, and it's so well done, and you just sort of and once his fears have kind of been realised, they've actually happened to him, he doesn't care for her anymore.
Yeah, he
kind of realizes that whatever they had was long gone, and he really didn't know her either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, in terms of technically, very, very well done, because you have that whole sort of mirror sequence, mm-hmm. which they had to sort of go back to some old school special effects to make that work. But yeah,
yes, I mean, no CGI removal in this film.
Exactly, it was pre that. But I mean, it is actually, I think, in many respects, an absolute crime that this film did not do well, because it is so brilliantly executed, well acted, and the story is really interesting. I mean, again, we're back to James Cameron, aren't we? He actually wrote this and produced it.
He came up with the story, and he wrote the screenplay with another writer called Jay Cox.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, I believe at this time that this is when Cameron and Bigelow were actually married.
Yeah, they were married, I think, 89 to 91, I think.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know. I know she was between it was between Gail Ann Hurd and Linda Hamilton in terms
Oh,
of
okay.
James Cameron's many
Oh, of
wives.
course. Yes, that's right. Yes, because he started dating Hamilton after Terminator 2. So,
That's right.
yes, you'd be correct. Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, Bigelow always says that they remained great friends. In fact, interestingly, that year 2010, when she was up for the Oscar, she was head to head with him in terms of the nominees, because he was up for Avatar, I guess. Yeah.
You sure it's 2010? You sure
Well,
it's not 2008?
it was 2009 was the film, but it was the 2010 Oscars, I believe. I think I'm right there. I may have got that wrong, but talk amongst yourselves. I don't know. I'll have a look. But anyway.
Well, I mean, Avatar came out sort of. It might have been. I mean, it's funny that IMDb's got the Hurt Locker as 2008 and Avatar's 2009. Might have been the 2009 Oscars.
All right. It was the.
I can double check that right now, because it should say about her wins.
Oh yeah, 2009. Yes, you're absolutely right. My bad. Yeah, 2009. It was the. What would that have been? The 82nd, I guess, Academy Awards.
Well, that I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I don't keep up to date on the how many. I have to say I don't really follow the Academy Awards.
No.
I mean, I've never been a big one for sort of staying up and watching the awards ceremony. I mean, it's always kind of interesting to say, well, you sort of predict who the winners are going to be, and most times it tends to be you can pick them.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it was interesting that she, like they usually do, she won the Academy Award, she won the BAFTA, and she won the Golden Globe Award all in that year, So, and deservedly, I think. But there you have it. In fact, it's interesting because Kathryn Bigelow does seem to keep her personal life quite quiet, because beyond the James Cameron marriage, I have no idea whether she's ever remarried or whether she has any children or anything, because it doesn't seem to be anything about that online. But nor should it be, because that's her private life and that's nothing to do with anyone else. But there you go.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
But yeah, the film Strange Days is just it is a masterpiece, and as I said, it is because of when it was set. It does, I suppose, somewhat date it, but it still doesn't stop it being a fucking awesome film.
It does. Now, I have to ask, did you watch the uncut version?
Oh, I didn't know there was. I didn't know there were two versions.
Yes, there is.
Okay,
there are. But in the UK, it was cut by a few seconds, and that is the scene where Iris is killed.
Right. Yes, which is pretty nasty. Yeah.
There's a bit more nudity in the uncut version than there is in.
Well, I have to say, I got myself again. This is a little DVD minefield stuff here, but I got the 20th anniversary, so it came out last year, German Blu-ray edition, simply because it's a 2-disc edition with the most extras you can get. Now, sadly, I was hoping some of them would be sort of retrospective documentaries and stuff, but they are actually, all of the extras on it are from when the film was made, so they're vintage extras. You get deleted scenes, interviews, behind the scenes, but you also do get that wonderful hour-long commentary on the opening shot, which is really interesting. From a filmmaker perspective, really interesting.
Right. Question for you.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a Steadicam and a Pogo Cam?
Right. She does talk briefly about that. Apparently, the Pogo Cam is a stripped down version of the Steadicam, because she said what had happened was the Steadicam was too smooth. It gave, so it didn't get, whereas handheld was too jerky. So she was trying to find a balance between the two to try and best simulate what our eyes see when we move and when we run and when we go up a flight of stairs. So what they did is they stripped down the Steadicam rig to a pogo cam, which is like a monopod essentially.
Oh, okay.
And that's about as much as I know. It's got a gyro at the bottom and all that sort of stuff. But she said it was to the point of it was to just try and better simulate a person's movement than you would with either handheld or full on Steadicam.
It sounds like a glide cam. It's what we use a lot now with digital SLRs.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like a handle, which is the gyro, and then you have a stick with the weights at the bottom of the stick.
Sounds very similar. Yes. Yeah. I mean, she called it, of course, technology. I mean, since that 20 years, it's moved on massively.
Well, you say that, but the glide cam is actually technology from 10 years ago. It's just that the cameras were always too heavy for it.
Yes.
Or they were just not the right weight. You can, I remember when I first started, you get these sort of steady cams, which used to be like a handle on a ball.
Yes.
And trying to get this thing just to balance and then stay still was a major ball ache. Now you can get them, and you can, with a digital SLR on them, you can actually use them. They're actually usable. They seem to come into their own now.
Yeah.
So,
well, interestingly,
tech that was designed, like 10, 15 years ago are coming to the fore now.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, she even does talk about this. I mean, bearing in mind this is 21 years ago, she did this lecture. She does talk about high def, and she said that at that point, the high def cameras were so big and so heavy that it just wasn't practical. It was easier to use. I know we sort of laugh now, but ironically, it was easier to use a 35 mil, stripped down camera than it was to try and embrace any high def technology on there. And interestingly, I mean, we mentioned Point Break and the remake, and I know a lot of the extreme sport photography looks fantastic in that film. I mean, I have to give credit where it's due there, but apparently some of that stuff was literally achieved on a GoPro. So God have things changed, it's incredible.
I'm sure the whole thing wasn't shot on a GoPro.
No, not the whole thing, bits of it, certain shots.
Bits of it, yeah. GoPros tend to get used for very sort of close-up shots and stuff. I mean, if you remember, Michael Mann used these they look like wands actually with cameras on them, so that in Ali, when you get like these, he was using the wands like punching, so you actually see like a point of view of the fist. But when those shots came on screen, you could see the quality just absolutely drop. But for a shot that lasts for about a second is moving, it's fine.
Yeah.
But for something that you want to shoot like a whole story on one of these things, it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
I owned a GoPro, and I sold it because I wanted to do things with it that it wasn't quite up there for, and that was to shoot a whole story with it, kind of point of view, and it just, for me, the quality wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's fine. Not to sort of talk down about it, but it's good for certain things, for the extreme sports, for you see most motorcyclists with them on their helmets all the time now, and for that kind of stuff it's fine. But I just felt personally that the quality wise it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't smooth enough. Now I would actually probably go with the DJI Osmos.
Yes, that's
if I was going to shoot something, because it's got a gyro on it. I mean, this is the problem with these new cameras, is that the wobble factor. It's called rolling shutter, but it's the wobble factor. It makes the image look like it's having a hissy fit.
Yeah.
Or there's an earthquake going on. It does turn the image into jello.
Yeah.
And it's just one of these side effects of having chips that are shoot really well in low light and give you that film look. But they're again, every year they're working on that, and they'll get to a point where you can shoot one of these cameras handheld and you won't have rolling shutter. But it's taken a while because heat is always a factor with these cameras.
Yeah.
The amount of cameras I've used now where overheating tends to be a problem. So,
well, no, I mean, she this lecture is quite interesting because, as I said, you hear even even little things that sort of aren't perceived as a problem now, but were 21 years ago. Like she was talking about the fact that they looked at Super 16, and they were going to originally have the dream record, not the dream recording, sorry, the squid recordings be in a different format. But she said the problem with that is they were trying to sell this idea that this captures life perfectly, in that definition. So they didn't want to have a different film grade and lose a generation and lose quality there. But she said by the same merit, she had to film all of this in 2:35:1 aspect ratio, which she said, when you think about it, that's not really how we see. But she said at the time, the movie theaters weren't equipped to deal with more than one aspect ratio as well during a film, which obviously, can be sort of dealt with nowadays. You only got to look at Wes Anderson films, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not that they can't deal with it. I think it's more accepted because it was always a case of that. If you watch one of those films in the cinema, the curtains doesn't change at all. They just pick one aspect ratio and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's just the size of, and then on the screen you get the black bars.
We did a similar thing with the short film I've just done. Actually, we used bars. We changed the ratio, but yeah, you're right. It's what audiences would have accepted at the time. It's very interesting to hear just how much thought and experimentation and planning went into that. And she talks very well, very eloquently about the process, and she's a real switched on lady, this one. I'm very impressed with this film, and I really do. For anyone who hasn't seen Strange Days, if you happen to be listening to this and haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it in a long while, I implore you, go back and check this film out, because it's really fucking good.
Yeah, and really good in its original aspect ratio as well.
Yes.
I mean, you lose a lot on like when it came out on VHS, when it was just pan and scan. So
you did, yeah. No, certainly on those. And of course, they had to also develop, it's fair to mention as well, for the actual jump, for the stuntman's jump, they had to develop another camera, which was actually part of the helmet, but was attached to a rig that they set up above, so he could safely jump with the camera. But when he fell down onto the airbag at the bottom, the camera wouldn't crush his head or break his neck or anything. Again, just the level of detail around safety and timing and all of that stuff with this is just remarkable. That's
why we call it movie magic.
Indeed, movie magic.
It doesn't look like anything on screen, but to see the behind the scenes, the amount of effort and equipment they had to use to achieve that, that's when you go, wow.
No, it is a great film, but it's not just not just what they did with the technology, but it is the actual story, the acting, everything about it. It's all round good, and it's such a shame they were robbed that it wasn't it wasn't successful, sadly.
Yeah, I have to say, just I always slightly found the dates of it kind of confusing, because it says it starts the day before New Year's Eve, but it's kind of like you have to think about it for a second, because it starts at night and then it goes day, night, and you think, wait a minute, how can that be? But then you sort of realize it's probably about it's probably like midnight the day before.
Yes.
So, yeah. So you get the whole early morning and then into the day, into the night, and then I had to think about it. It was kind of confusing because it comes up with the dates.
Yeah. No, it does.
And you're going, wait a minute, what? Wait a minute. Shouldn't, like, the day he wakes up after the opening sequence, shouldn't that be New Year's Eve? But there's kind of like there's no time. There's not like a sort of a clock to say what time it is.
Yeah, so there's not like a 24 ticking clock in there. No.
Yeah. And there's a shot that they used. I I think for the trailer, I mean, I've certainly seen it in the poster and stuff of Lenny on a big screen. You never actually see that in the
It's
film.
a deleted scene. It is in the deleted scenes. It's part of where he tries to crash the party, and he actually steals a. It was probably deleted because it was a bit weak in some respects. He steals a pass from the media guys, but he goes up and sort of gets in front of the camera, so he is seen on the big screen, and they're distracted, and he sort of whips the pass off them, which maybe that's why it doesn't end up in the film. But you're right, they used it for all the marketing.
They did, yeah,
for obvious reasons. But of course, they had to set it over more than one day so that Ray Fiennes or Lenny Nero would get to wear more than one of these wonderful costumes that they've got him in this film.
And such a wonderful selection of ties.
Yeah, exactly. I did like the one sort of comedy line where he goes, "Oh, this tie doesn't go with blue." There's all this chaos going on, and they've just like escaped near death.
Lots of comments about his ties. I mean, Max even says, Lenny says to him, "Oh, I didn't realize you were colorblind." He says, "Well, how do you think I put up with all your ties these years?" Anyway, we're going to move on.
Yes.
We're going to move on to our movie hells. So join us after these messages.
Kane, the stone cold assassin.
3 men, Corbin Taylor, Zeke Jones, and Jesse Williams, were held for questioning by Marshal Gazer.
His revenge will be swift.
Ain't you the law around here, Sheriff?
Nowhere to run, no place to hide.
Jesse, you ever meet Kane?
The new violent and bloody horror short from director Mike Tack. Red Wolf Pines.
Is that what you told Luke?
He died like the dog he was.
Starring Keith Eyles as Kane.
That bastard ain't gonna find us out here.
Available on YouTube and official website www.apocalypticconservatory.com. Red Wolf Pines. Rated R for rowdy.
So, you're making a film.
Horror film. Meta horror film. A horror film about horror film. Horror film about cinema.
And why would you do that? Life is so beautiful. You just have something in your eye.
I thought you said you wanted to do something different. Why do the same thing that everyone else is doing?
They drive me mad. They all have opinion on everything. Nobody listened to me. Nobody tried to understand anything. Just too much. I found out recently that I had a syndrome when I was younger. When I try to go to sleep, the whole world will change. Like everything will go too quick, too slow, or too big, too small. I could control it.
Benny Loves Killing. Available now on Vimeo and IndieFlix.
And if they don't go for it, you'll kill them all.
What's the matter, Jane?
It's kind of hard to explain. I can't put my finger on it, but there's definitely something wrong. Jane?
I suppose we can't expect her to get over it just like that.
It must be past this.
So bright. Why is it so bright in here?
It's just the dawn, Jane.
You have to take her to the hospital. Have her placed under constant watch.
Well, that much I know, but who done it?
You don't even try and stop me. You know I'm going to harm you, yet you do nothing. What about that wonderful husband of yours?
Oh, Martin. I love him.
Well, someone has to die.
Roses. Available now on Amazon.com on DVD and video on demand. And we're back. So, Keith, what is your pick for movie hell?
Yeah, well, okay, for movie hell, I mean, like I've already sort of said right at the beginning, I don't necessarily think Kathryn Bigelow's done any bad films as such, but she certainly have done a couple that haven't worked. Obviously,
well, I'm gonna disagree with you because I think your pick actually is a bad film, and I will.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some good. I'll give you my reasons.
Oh, that's
why,
good.
But,
that's what we want.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
But
yeah,
when
there was a bit of a gap because Strange Days sadly wasn't a commercial success. There was a little bit of a gap before her next film, which was in 2000, and it was a film called The Weight of Water. Now, the reason I chose this as movie hell was simply because I'd seen the movie when it came out. Obviously, Kathryn Bigelow film. I wanted to go see it. It also had, some good actors in, and wanted to see what was going on here. But I completely forgot everything about this film. It definitely did not stick in my memory at all. So I went back and revisited it for this podcast, and it is one of these sort of part mystery, part historical films. And I think it actually doesn't work because it's one of these films, and they seldom do work that's trying to take place. There's two plots going on. There's a contemporary plot and there's a historical plot. And this is basically this was adapted from a novel of the same name by Alice Arlen. And it wasn't Alice Arlen did the screenplay. Sorry, Anita Shreve did the novel, The Weight of Water. Sorry, my bad.
All those Anita fans out there will be screaming
at me. No, she did a thing called The Weight of Water, and what it was, the historical part was based on the Smutty Nose Island murders of 1873, which took place in the Isle of Shoals, just off Maine, where some Norwegian immigrants that move across to the States and try and survive as fishermen off that coast. There's a murder that happens. It involves actually, I was surprised, a really young looking Kieran Hines was in it. He's a great actor, but I almost didn't recognize him to start with because I thought, wow, he looks super young there. Plays a character called Louis Wagner, who's found guilty of the murder of two women, as I said, on that island one night. And what you've then got is you've got a contemporary part of the film, which stars Catherine McCormick as a journalist who is going on a trip to this area, to the Isle of Shoals, to investigate this, to do an article about these murders. And she's a photographer, very much a visual artist that's going, and she's going with her husband, who is played by Sean Penn, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning poet. And they're basically meeting up with his brother, which is played by Josh Lucas. Thank you. And Josh Lucas's girlfriend, which is played by the lovely Elizabeth Hurley. And
charisma vacuum, Elizabeth Hurley.
Yes, indeed. she's just there for eye candy, I felt.
Oh my God, she's such a bad actress.
Yes.
It just goes to show that she had a career off the back of that one photograph in the press where she was wearing the Louis Vuitton dress, which was, literally had her tits bursting out. I mean, I'm not being catty or anything, but it just seemed to be, she just didn't bring anything to the story.
No. Well, she's kind of, obviously she's the latest squeeze, the latest girlfriend of Josh Lucas's character, but she's also a little bit of a a fangirl and has somewhat of a flirtatious crush on the Sean Penn character, much to the annoyance of, and rightly so, of his missus. And of course, she spends most of her time on this yacht that they're on, in very skimpy bikinis.
Well, Elizabeth Hurley does. Not so much. Kathryn
No. Kathryn doesn't. And I mean, it's Kathryn. We're sort of told the story. Well, the contemporary part of the story we're sort of told very much through her eyes. Whereas we've got this 1873 story with the Norwegian women, and essentially you've basically got I'm terrible on character names. I can't remember the names of the characters, but you've got the main woman that's come across is essentially a housewife, and she's there to feed the men and clean the home. I mean, we are talking 1873 here, guys. But she works very hard, and she finds out that more of the family are going to come across and join them, and she has to make room for in this home. And one of which is her brother and his new wife. And we learn through this film or through this story that there was when she was younger, there was some incest involved between her and her brother, and the fact that she still clearly loves her brother, but not in the right way that she should love her brother. So of course there is some jealousy towards the brother's new bride. Okay, so this whole film deals a lot with jealousy, because you've got it both in the contemporary story and in the past story. The problem is neither of them really mesh or meld well together. Now, I feel you're itching to say something, Simon, so I will shut up a minute and let you say your piece.
Is that obvious?
Yeah, sorry, I can kind of hear you bursting on the other end there. Like I can't see you, but I can hear you, and you're just thinking, Keith, take a breath, shut up. Too much information. Let me say something. So I'm going to shut up and let you speak.
Well, the first problem I have with this film, you just sort of talked about the incest side of the story. There's this weird thing that also people who take part in incest are lesbians as well.
Yes.
Which I really can't believe that they sort of made that connection. It just really seems stupid. I could understand the jealousy part.
Yeah.
And okay, fine. So Sarah Polley's character has a relationship with her brother. And you can, okay. And she's sent away from the States because this was discovered by the elder sister, who's kind of like the matriarch of that family.
That's correct.
So she's married off so that, that her wicked ways won't, that she'll be cured of it somehow. And of course, when her brother turns up with the new bride, who also finds out that she's pregnant, which Sarah Polley's character cannot get pregnant.
Actually, yes, I failed to mention a really good a really important plot point there.
Yeah, but I mean, that plot point in its own was enough. We didn't need this kind of lesbian liaison and then being caught again by the elder sister that sparks this off.
Yeah.
So you've got this period piece drama, which I think personally on its own would have been all right.
Yeah, I think it's the stronger of the two halves.
It is the stronger of the two halves, but the problem is straight away you know who the killer was, and you know that is it Cian Murphy? No, Cian Hines.
Yeah,
is innocent, and so there's no mystery to it. I mean, I knew straight away that the person who was in the dock accusing him of this, the only person who was there,
the only survivor, yes, the only
was the guilty person. There was just no mystery, so you have to sit through this thing and wait for it to go on. And then on the other hand, you've got this really trudged, really just sort of horrible, present day scenes where everything's kind of set up by voiceover. You have Kathryn McCormick's character give this voiceover where she states that we didn't know that we were going to die. And you're like, what? Okay, that's left any kind of suspense out. You're just sort of waiting for that to happen.
Well, also made no sense. Yeah.
And then you have to sit through this whole, oh God, they like spouting poetry.
Yeah.
To each other. And oh my God, it's just, you have to sit for this thing. And it's just like, oh, please hurry up. Just get on with it, because this film did not need to be 2 hours long.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing. I mean, I think there was definitely some pacing issues here. The other thing that was a bit weird about this, I thought, was you had, which at the time were kind of more your star actors in inverted commas in the contemporary part of the film. However, as we've already mentioned, the more interesting half of the film is actually the period piece. And interestingly, you even look at the poster and everything to the marketing for this film was all based entirely around, Sean Penn and Elizabeth Hurley and essentially the modern day sailboat, and the contemporary side of the story. So it starts off with that, I know, but you kind of it kind of sets it up to be something different to what you actually get. The other thing that's obviously weird as well is you've kind of got flashbacks within a flashback, which I'll give her due. She did that in black and white to try and make it a little bit less confusing structurally, those bits. But
no, it wasn't black and white. I think you're confusing because every time Kathryn McCormick takes a photograph, it goes to black and white. It's all in colour.
Well, they have the bit. I mean, they have the murders bit in black and white. That's all done in black and white.
No, it wasn't. It was the version I saw. It was all in colour.
Really?
I don't remember there being a black and white bit. I don't remember there kind of being a black and white flashback.
Okay.
And I just watched it.
All right.
I literally finished it before we did this podcast.
Okay. Well,
so
you've seen it more recently than me. Then, but okay. But
I mean, it would make sense. I mean, that's the norm for a flashback, isn't it? To have it in black and white, because then it's a flashback or it's a dream sequence. But of course,
you had flashbacks. That was the thing. You kind of had the flashback to the 1873 story, but then you also had the flashbacks within the 1873 story to the murder stuff. So you had kind of several things going on. But what really didn't work with this, and I don't know whether this is down to the scripting of it, was I just felt like, particularly when you got to the end and they started sort of cutting between the two time periods more, that didn't work at all. It just didn't gel together. And hence why I think this is, in my opinion, her weakest film, because
it's very weak. It's very weak. But I also get the whiff of studio interference.
Right.
I really get the whiff of it. I think when she gave them her cut, they didn't like it, and hence why we get this really clunky voiceover. The voiceover doesn't make any sense, and it lays everything up front, and so you know what the hell's going on, and it's just high, and she talks about her kids and stuff, which never play any part in the story. And also the ending's bloody confusing.
It is,
because
yeah. Well,
Elizabeth Hurley goes over, Sean Penn goes over, I think.
Yeah, well, he dives in to get her, doesn't he?
Yeah, Kathryn McCormick goes in, and they somehow rescue Elizabeth Hurley and Kathryn McCormick, even though you see Kathryn McCormick moving away from the boat.
Yeah.
I mean, she's dragged away such a far distance. There's no coming back from that, yet she's still rescued. And I didn't even realise, I was like trying to think, so, okay, I don't see Sean Penn, so obviously he died?
Yeah.
But I didn't see it, and nobody said anything about it. They all sort of looked a bit lost and sad, and I was just like,
yeah. Well, and of course,
okay.
As Sean Penn likes, I mean, Sean Penn's, very, very cool in this, but as he likes to do as well is, he's got his whole sort of tortured poet thing going on, simply because we have a bit of backstory with him as well, that his he actually killed one of his girlfriends in a car accident when he was very young, which was apparently what inspired him to start writing this series of poems. And these series of poems are the things that Liz Hurley, got all excited about, and had this like crush on him for. And of course, the Kathryn McCormick character always feels like the girl he killed was the true love of his life, and she was. I mean, there was there was intention, there were these things there, but
it just didn't play out, and they clumsily tried to do this sort of whole jealousy thing where Kathryn McCormick may have slept with Josh Lucas, but it's just it's so badly done, and so it's weird. In a film that's 2 hours long, it's rushed.
Yes.
So
yes.
It's just the pacing of it's so weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with this one, it was produced by A. Kipman Ho, and obviously, this was after Cameron was producing her work by this period. He sort of moved on to do his things, but it's interesting you say about was there studio interference, and I think because Strange Days, and wrongly so, had been such a commercial flop, a commercial failure, then yeah, quite possibly, this was their next outing. Quite possibly there was a lot more interference. I really don't know. What's interesting is I tried to find out more information, as I always do with these things. I watched the film. The film, didn't have any extras on it at all. It was just the film. And I tried, Googling to see if Kathryn Bigelow, there were any interviews with her about this film. And there's very little out there to find out more, which is kind of interesting. So, maybe this is one that she wants to forget about as well. Who knows? Because she never seems to talk about, when she does talk about her body of work in various interviews, this one never really seems to get a mention anywhere. So, but yeah, I'm sure the novel itself is actually, I've not read it, but I'm sure it's quite interesting, because I could kind of see that there is something here in terms of, bringing a historical story that's a bit of a mystery, and sort of framing it with this modern day drama with four people, which obviously involves jealousy and similar themes and all this, but it didn't mesh together in this film at all. It felt like two different movies rather than one movie very well put together. And
well, one story informing the other, because I always loved what they did with Godfather Part 2.
Yes.
And the fact that you saw the rise of Corleone, of the Godfather, and then you saw the fall of Michael.
Yes.
So you had these two stories, interweaving with each other, but not only informing each other from a point of view of seeing how the family came into power and how the family was falling out of power.
Mm-hmm.
So two opposite dynamics, but working together. While this, it was very sort of loosely connected. I mean, as I say, the audience was very much ahead of this story. I knew exactly what was going to happen on the sort of the historical part very early on. So my interest in that was kind of like, well, okay, let's see what happens. But I found that to be more interesting compared to the modern day stuff. Mm-hmm. The modern day stuff just seemed to be up its own arse.
Yes, yeah. Seriously
up its own arse. And it's just like, I just was waiting for them to get back to the historical stuff. So they could have had like a good hour, thing there. And they could have, if they started it off just, without the trial or the murder at the beginning, or, and you sort of seen as happening as, in a chronological order, and then you see, you know, this poor guy being put on trial, that it would make more sense. It would actually be emotionally a lot better than, you know, going, well, we know what happens. We'll have to watch. We'll see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it going to be any different? No.
No. And in the
No.
contemporary part, I mean, you kind of have some empathy and sort of connect with Kathryn McCormick's character to an extent, but the others don't really, you know, even the likes of Sean Penn don't really bring anything to the table particularly. You know, he just comes across as quite arrogant and unlikable, actually.
Yeah.
And Josh Lucas doesn't seem to do anything at all, really. It's like you know, him and Elizabeth Hurley, they are like the couple that are just there to be pretty. So yeah, I just sort of felt, as I said, I had forgotten all about this. I'd even forgotten it was in Kathryn Bigelow's resume. And when we looked to pick a movie, Hell, I thought, oh well, I've totally forgotten this one, and that must say something. So went back to watch it, and I realised why I'd forgotten about it is there was potentially something interesting in there, but it didn't quite mesh and it didn't quite work as a complete piece.
Well, I think because they were just too faithful to the book.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
because in the book you can delve into feelings and, you know, you can talk about them in great length, you know, in prose, but on a film, you know, unless you kind of really heavily delve into that, it doesn't quite work. It needed to be like the book being used as a source and then try and do something a bit more different. Yeah. Instead of trying to just follow the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, I've not read the book, but from what I can see is it doesn't deviate in terms of the story and the characters. Yeah, so I just, you know, it's a bit underwhelming. You know, I'm sure Kathryn Bigelow approached it, you know, in a very competent fashion. I have no doubt. I mean, but yeah, the final product just doesn't really gel and doesn't really work. And it's a shame because I think it could have been interesting. I think it had sort of potential. It just didn't quite work in the way it was structured. And who knows? That could have been any number of reasons. It could have been studio interference. Who knows? I don't know.
It just wasn't. It wasn't very good. It wasn't up to her normal standard of work.
No.
Anyway, moving on. We head back out into the waters.
Yes.
Seems Kathryn Bigelow and water just does not mix. Even though Point Break has a lot of water in it, so maybe that's not true. But, it seems after 2000, Kathryn Bigelow and water just didn't mix. There you go. Anyway, my pick for movie Hell is the 2002 film K-19, The Widowmaker. Now, this film sort of was the last of the submarine films we had there for a while. So, you know, it kind of started off with The Hunt for Red October, and we had Crimson Tide, and then we had like U571, and we had that piece of crap called Below that we talked about on our David Toohey podcast.
And obviously all stemming back to Das Boot, which was the sort of benchmark, I think, for sub films.
Yeah. Oh, I read recently that you do not call it Das Boot, you actually say Das Boat.
Oh. Well, there you go.
Even though it's spelt boot, but the actual proper pronunciation is boat. So Das Boat.
Wolfgang Peterson, I apologise.
Anyway, based on a true story, and you know, should have been quite a tense thriller. Actually, just was meh.
Yeah.
The story is about the sort of Russia's first nuclear submarine malfunctions on its maiden voyage, and it seems to be from a whole. They didn't spend much money on it. It seems they cut costs on this ship, and this is one of the reasons why it sort of, you know, they had such problems. Also, the fact that they had a real problem keeping crew because a lot of them were either being fired or being knocked over.
Yeah.
You know, it just stems from the fact that when they christen the ship, the bottle doesn't break. So straight away, the sailors believe it's cursed. And
yeah, which
as the audience member, you're going, well, that kind of takes the suspense out of it, really, then, isn't it? There's not going to be much of a surprise.
Yeah, I thought that was actually a bit heavy-handed because, you know, yes, the champagne doesn't break on the bow, right? And we all kind of get that. But what really annoyed me is they had that Russian, you know, shipmate guy go, oh, dear, we're cursed. And I sort of thought, oh, come on, it didn't need that, did it? That was really spelling it out. I just thought that was a bit heavy-handed. I was like, it doesn't need that. Come on, give us some credit.
Yeah. I tell you what, that Russian fleet, they're really stingy. I mean, the fact that they gave them fire equipment instead of radiation suits, you know, most of the things didn't work on the boat. They couldn't find a proper sort of engineer to run it. They gave them a student, and it just, yeah, it's a bit of a trudge, this film. I mean, you know, it's again kind of like it's about 2 hours, and the running time's that long because we get a touching scene at the end where you get a whole lot of actors in old makeup.
Yeah.
Well, Liam Neeson and Harrison Ford in old makeup, and then you probably
how they look now.
Yeah, it's kind of close, isn't it? Though Harrison Ford doesn't have glasses, but well, we should actually call him Harrison Fordski because they all do Russian accents.
Well, yeah, that was.
It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, I mean that was the other thing. They didn't do the sort of Valkyrie / Hunt for Red October, you know, type thing where they chose to just ignore the accents, but they sort of put on these faux accents, which is a bit daft anyway, because in reality they'd be speaking Russian. So
yes, yeah.
So that was a bit distracting.
Well, I have to say though, I think they did mention Sean Connery's accent in Hunt for Red October, not the fact that he was a Scotsman playing a Russian. Sure, I'm a Russian submarine captain.
Red October standing by. Yes.
Sure, this is your land, America.
But yeah, I mean, you know, in films like Hunt for Red October and Valkyrie and whatever, they just kind of you know, let it go and ignore it. Whereas in this, they do try to address it. But yeah,
there's a shot where the camera moves around and they're speaking Russian, and then as it passes them, as they cross the screen, they're suddenly speaking English.
Yeah.
So it's a well and trusted way of doing that. So yeah, and you know, because the thing is, it's an American film, so Americans don't want to sit through watching subtitles throughout the whole film. So you have to sort of do that, change it to English. Otherwise, you know, you're not going to get as many bums on the seat as if it was subtitles, which is sad, but unfortunately that's the American market for you.
Yeah, and also I believe the actual Russian community initially wasn't. They had to make some changes, I believe, because they weren't happy about the way some of this was portrayed. I'm sure I read that somewhere.
Well, I mean, the fact that there's this whole so they kind of go into sort of Crimson Tide territory where you have the captain played by Harrison Ford and his executive officer played by Liam Neeson. And Liam Neeson's character is originally was the original captain of the ship, and he was replaced by Harrison Ford because taking too much time building this new submarine, because Liam Neeson was kind of being reasonable, you know. Yeah, I just was expecting that scene where he goes, "Chaps, it's a nuclear submarine. Maybe we should be a bit more careful about it," but there wasn't that scene. He was kind of, you know, you could tell that people were unhappy that he was being replaced, but he kind of wasn't fighting it, you know. I guess was kind of happy not to have that responsibility taken off his shoulders. But there comes a scene where the crew kind of rebel after they have their accident, which is it's a water leak. So the core is exposed and is overheating, so they have to come up with this solution of sort of redirecting the pipes from their water system into the nuclear reactor. And of course this means guys going in there for 10 minutes and getting radiation sickness. And of course, unfortunately though, there's no way of doing this without the core being exposed somewhat to the rest of the ship. So everybody's getting sick on this. They're all being exposed to radiation. And so a couple of the crew, they mutiny, and they want Liam Neeson's character to sort of take over. And you think he is, and then he turns on them and is like, no, you're not proper Russians, and all this stuff. Because there's an American cruiser nearby, and they're offering help. And of course, Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson are sort of fighting back and forth of whether or not to get the Americans to help. But of course, if the Americans help, then they get to see the submarine and learn its secrets, and they would be the laughing stock of
Russia.
Also
bearing in mind that this is in 1961 this takes place, so it is right in the sort of height of the Cold War era as well.
Which again, you don't really get the sense of that. There's no sense of that really. As an audience member, you're going, well, why don't you just let the Americans help you? You don't really get the sense that of the Cold War, It's not like how Crimson Tide does this very well. It starts off with news footage saying that there's been a coup in Russia and that this mad general's taken over and his forces are trying to get the launch codes for the missiles. So straight away, there's a tension going on. There's problems. With this, you have no real contents of what's going on in the bigger world. You just know what's happening with the ship. And it seems it was a wrong way of doing it.
Mm. Yeah,
you needed a bigger, idea of what was going on at that time.
Yeah.
Because the film doesn't provide that. Unless you're sort of, know about history and what was happening in that time, you really don't get a sense of that threat. Maybe they wanted to sort of concentrate more on the crew and their tragedy, but then you don't get a sense of, then as an audience member, you're kind of going, come on, just let the Americans help you. You're in real bad shit here. We can see that. Everybody can see that.
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder, actually, whether they were, because this was definitely one of Kathryn Bigelow's passion projects. This was 5 years in development of this film, and they worked on it a lot. Obviously, it's also, we're not featuring Board Ford here, because this is actually Harrison Ford produced this as well and was quite involved.
Oh, okay.
But you often wonder, and because I agree with you, I don't think this works particularly well overall as a film, and you just do wonder whether they were almost so close to it, that they weren't spotting those obvious things, like the fact that for a modern audience, watching this in 2002 when it was released, many of those people, us included, we grew up, sort of after the Cold War thing, and weren't necessarily, maybe they were so close to this that they made this massive assumption that people would know, because it's set in 1961. Those tensions.
Well, no, actually, you're wrong. We grew up at sort of the end of the Cold War, because I remember during the 80s there was still not so much the Red Scare, but the nuclear scare. And I remember seeing stuff when I was young, like not the Do You Want to Play a Game,
Mm-hmm.
but there was this BBC sort of mock documentary about what would happen if there was a nuclear explosion in a major
Yes, I
city.
remember that. Yes, yeah.
There was also Fred's.
Mm-hmm.
Which I saw again recently. Oh my God, that is a tough watch. And there was also the American miniseries as well, which had like Steve Guttenberg and a lot of other actors. I think it was like the day after.
Oh yeah, the morning after, I think it was. Yeah, the day. I know the one you mean. It was a horrible sort of depiction of post-nuclear war. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And let's not forget When the Wind Blows as well. Of course. An animation, by the same guy who did the Snowman.
There's a contrast, eh?
Yeah. So I was very aware growing up of the nuclear threat.
Yeah.
And kids today, they are not aware. I mean, it's still there. I mean, you have North Korea testing, missiles, and their range are getting is longer and longer, and they have a nuclear program. I mean, hearing the news again recently, the amount of times that they nearly fired Trident. They say there was like 18 times we came close to actually one of our Trident missiles being fired by mistake.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Scary times. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because the thing about watching any post-apocalyptic films, and we watched a lot, I know I have, is that once you hit that button and those missiles go flying,
that's it.
That is it.
Yeah.
There is no coming back from that. And it if you thought Brexit was bad, this is 100 times worse than Brexit, because this would change the face of the earth forever,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you get that kind of tension in Crimson Tide, but you don't get it in this.
I mean, one of the parts of this that does kind of work is the sort of, hence why they do the thing when they're older years later, but the built friendship between Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson's character, that comes across, and I think they were trying to obviously be very respectful to the story and to the bravery of the crew involved, but it is weird how it is kind of a lackluster. I actually remember, but we're back to we are back to Keith's story again, because this does have some relevance. K-19, The Widowmaker, was actually the first film that I ever saw at BAFTA. Okay, that was the same year I'd got my BAFTA membership. I'd obviously come back from the US the year before, and I went to see this, and they had Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson actually doing a Q&A afterwards. And I remember, weirdly, I ended up sitting next to Clarissa Flockhart for this, which was weird, but it just happened to be where I was sitting. And they whenever they do a Q&A, they kind of bring the guests in afterwards, and she just sort of came and plonked next to me. I was like, oh, it's Ally McBeal, there you go. But
as she is Finn in real life as she is on screen.
Oh yes, very much so, but perfectly formed. But no, I mean, I'm loving. I'm going off topic totally now, but I'm loving what she's doing in Supergirl at the moment as Cat Grant. In another guilty pleasure. There you go. But anyway, but I remember they came and obviously, there was a Q&A, but it was kind of, even with that, you'd think that this film, I'd actually forgotten until we went and revisited this. I'd forgotten that. So that says something right there about how it's not one of the ones that really sort of dragged me in and made me think, wow, and I think actually, if I remember right, Harrison Ford got kind of annoyed in the Q&A because, of course, somebody, it wasn't me, I will hasten to add, but somebody had to bring up the Star Wars connection, because he and Liam Neeson were on stage, and I remember Ford, he was bored Ford at that point. He did get a little bit annoyed about that, and understandably so, because of course he was there to talk about this movie, which he produced as well. But
do you mean there was a fanboy in the audience?
I think there might have been. Yeah, but it was just kind of like, I mean, I groaned as well, even as a fanboy myself. I sort of groaned and thought, oh, that's not appropriate for this, but whatever.
No, saying that, you do get, you get Qui-Gon Jinn and Han Solo in the same film.
Yes. But and Bigelow sadly wasn't there. I mean, I was lucky enough. She came to do a Q&A at Zero Dark 30 a few years back, so I did get to see her speak, and she's a fantastic speaker at those sort of things. She's very good. But yeah, this film, I mean, again, a lot of work went into it. I know they kind of sort of took the Cameron approach of actually building the sub rather than trying to do everything with CG or miniatures. They actually kind of took a life-size Juilliard class sub and actually extended it and put a new top on it, and to make it, you know, resemble exactly the K-19 from that period. And you know, I think the film, in terms of production values and everything, is very good. But I agree with you. I mean, the bit that works is Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson and their kind of on-screen relationship and chemistry there. I think Peter Sarsgaard's very good in this film also.
Yeah, I mean, he has a kind of interesting story arc in there. He is brought in to be the main engineer on the radio, the reactor.
And let's face it, a job no one wants.
No, but I mean, the fact is, he has no experience. He is literally just graduated from nuclear school. So, but when they first go in to repair the reactor, he chickens out, and another guy takes his place. And then later on in the story, the reactor breaks down again, and he's the only one there. So he actually goes in. He mans up and he goes in, and of course he certainly pays for that. And but I mean, but yeah, he kind of like, he's really the only kind of character in there that goes for some sort of, you know, story arc.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's horrific to think. I mean, you know, this is actually based on true events, and you know, oh God, can you imagine? I mean, you know, it's you think about it, it's claustrophobic and horrible enough to be submersed underwater and in you know, in this vessel, but then when you think that it's also a vessel that is leaking radiation, it's like, I can't think of anything worse, you know. I mean, that is hell right there. And I think sometimes they maybe didn't necessarily get the horror of that across as much as the film perhaps could have, because I do sort of agree with you. It is a bit, you use the term meh at the beginning, and that is kind of how I felt a little bit watching it. It's you can appreciate so many things about it. I mean, you know, you can see the craftsmanship, and you can see it's well made, and you know, it's reasonably well acted. I know people have criticized, you know, Ford and Neeson for their accents and stuff, but you know, forgiving that, you know, it's good. But overall, it does have a kind of like, okay, you know, quality, and it's a shame to think that, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. I maybe they didn't play enough on the horrific aspects of it, perhaps.
No, I think again, it's because you got to care about your characters. When you put characters through that, you have to care for them, and that's the thing that Boat does very well, is that you get to know these characters and you get to care for them. So when they're in those tense situations, you're there with them. And the problem with this film is that we didn't really get to know anybody, and also the fact as well is that we knew it was doomed from the beginning. So, you know, you're just sort of waiting for that happen, but there's no kind of suspense. I mean, I don't know why I go back to Crimson Tide, because it does that very well, you know.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. I mean, it's far more popcorn, but yes, it does. But it does do that.
Yeah, but I mean, it does that whole, because it explores a situation where, you know, you've got your finger on the button, and should you press it or not? You know.
Yeah.
Because if you press it, you're going to start World War III. You're going to start a nuclear war, and you know, there's a reason why nobody fires these things at each other, because it's because of MAD, which is a mutually assured destruction. You fire one, they fire one, and nobody's surviving this. There's no winners. Hence why there's like stockpiles of these damn things, because there was the nuclear race. Oh, we have to have more than Russia. Oh, we have to have more than the States. And it bankrupted Russia. I mean, the end of the Cold War was the fact that Russia couldn't pay for all this. They couldn't pay for their military. And that's why it fell apart. And so I guess they were going for that angle with the whole sort of cost cutting on the whole sub itself, but the problem is, when you see that up front, you know it's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
so when it happens, it's inevitable. I mean, if you didn't know any of that, and you just concentrated on the characters, or maybe even just from one point of view, because you've got to remember, there's lots of point of views going on in this film.
Well, there are. I mean, this is perhaps one of the problems as well, as apart from Harrison Ford, Liam Neeson, and Peter Sarsgaard, the rest of the crew, the rest of the characters, we don't really get explored at all, do they? I mean, we have that one bit, like you said, with the potential mutiny, where the second officer, etc., steps up. But yeah, there really isn't much of that, and yeah, it is kind of you don't have the crew defined particularly on this, and like you said, in that kind of environment, you've got to care about everyone, and this is quite literally a Harrison Ford, Liam Neeson vehicle, and I don't look at it and think, oh, that this is a bad film or this is awful or anything like that. I just look at it and think that it's another one of her canon that's a little bit forgettable.
Yeah.
And as I said, I didn't even remember until, watching it again, that this was the first film I ever saw at BAFTA, at a BAFTA screening, which you know how much I love my BAFTA screenings. And I've forgotten.
It's like you'd never bring it up.
Yeah, well, it's all done with love. but yeah, it's just kind of it's an interesting film, but it's not. Yeah, it's just not stand out, and it's interesting. Since this, she's gone on to do film. Again, there was another gap, but then she did go on to do films that did have notable acclaim for her.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, she came back in a big way with The Hurt Locker.
Yeah.
And then Zero Dark 30, and then whatever the next project is. We're due one next year in 2017. Very interested to see what that one is about.
Exactly. It'll be good. She does like to spend again. She does spend a fair amount of time in development, which rather than just sort of knocking them out one after another, which is a good thing. But as I said, it hasn't worked on all of them, unfortunately.
No. So, any finishing thoughts about Kathryn Bigelow?
No, just that I want to see more from her, because she is a really, really great filmmaker, and it's been nice to talk about her. So
yes, oh, definitely. And
good on you, Kathryn.
Very happy to see what she does next. I'll be interested in seeing that film. So we're going to end this episode in our normal fashion. So Keith, where can we find your work?
Okay, if you go to YouTube and put in British Eyles, that's Eyles, as in my last name, there are films that I've made that you can view there. Also, if you want to see other things that I've been involved in, if you go to IMDb and put in my name, Keith Eyles, Eyles, there's a list of some of the work there. Plus, I will keep you updated as to any screenings that I happen to get with the next project, which is doing the festival circuit.
And what is that project called?
It's called Taste.
There you go.
Thank you.
So keep an eye out for it. You can check out my work at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And if you're on iTunes and Stitcher, please leave us a review and a rating. It all helps. Trust me, it does. Anyway, so that's it for this episode. And I hope you join us for the next episode of Movie Heaven, Movie Hell.